handle the truth. You can't handle the truth.
What do all men in power want? More power.
My name is Gianluca Zanna. I was an Italian by birth, and I became an American by choice. Our lives and freedoms are in danger. This is not a drill. If you're listening to this broadcasting, you are the resistance.
All systems go.
Welcome to Love, Guns, and Freedom. Here we go, guys. Another Sunday, another show. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom with Luca Zanna on K-Talks 1340 AM and on UnitedStates.fm network. Last Sunday, we started the big saga. Okay, this is not the Lord of the Rings, okay? This is something for me more important. The saga of candidates running for Mohave County Sheriff position. Why do I put so much emphasis, so much effort and attention to this type of candidates? Because I really believe that the position of the county sheriff is vital. It's vital to take our republic back. We already talked about that many times. I had here Sheriff Mack, and we talk about the case, the Supreme Court case, Mack Prince against the United States, that reminded to the federal government the jurisdiction of the sheriff, what type of powers the sheriff has. So why is so important? Because my only goal, as I said, I'm not here to pander or to push anybody. After all, as I said, I became an independent, and for a very good reason, because I don't want to be labeled, oh, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. No, I stick with the Constitution, and I stick here for the truth. And my only goal, as I said also many times, especially when I bring you candidates, is not to push anybody, but to give you, the listeners, the opportunity to know more about these candidates. I will ask questions that normally they are important for me. And I also believe to you, because if we believe in the same beliefs, I think these are the questions we would ask. Simple as that. And then I just pray that you, the listener, and more important, the voters, will make the accurate decision. As simple as that. Now, second candidate of this saga, with an incredible guy, because I say incredible because they're all incredible for me. When you run for such a position, that especially when you are more than, I think, 6 candidates running against each other, it's kind of an effort. It's kind of a commitment. So I think everybody deserves at least the idea to be commendable for that, okay? Anyway, he's a gentleman from Bullhead, I guess, but we'll find out pretty soon. His name is John Plough. I'm sure I completely butchered the last name like I did the last candidate, so he's going to correct it right now. John, please, are you there? Plough.
Yeah, I'm here. It's John Plough, just like what the farmer does to his field.
I know. Listen, this time I'm sorry, but I almost did it intentionally just to be equal, because last time I butchered the first candidate, okay? So I didn't do the same to you. Anyway, nice to meet you, John. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. As you heard before in my intro, I'm not here I have no agenda but the truth. And of course, I don't know you, you don't know me, but we want to know you, because after all, we must know you. You are the guy running for county sheriff. So I want to give you this microphone, and I would like to throw some questions at you. We're going to have almost a full hour, so it's going to be kind of interesting. And first of all, let's start to introduce yourself. I know that you're a candidate that seems like you don't have, let's say, a professional background in law enforcement, but every one of us has a background. Tell us about your background. Who are you? How old are you? What you do for a living? Blah, blah, blah. Go ahead, please.
All right, so you got that right. I'm the only one in the race who's not actually a cop. I'm a Navy veteran, and I did one tour in active duty as a sonar technician. That's one of the more intellectually rigorous jobs in the Navy. You have to know a lot about electronics and tactics and whatnot. And then I spent some time as a Navy Reserve, and that prepared me in the civilian world for absolutely nothing. There's no companies out there that are hiring people to sink submarines. So after I left the military, I got into sales, and in that capacity, I've worked in a lot of different arenas. So I have a wide variety of business experience in a wide variety of different fields. I've been a mortgage loan officer, a commodities broker. I've done construction estimating, and I've been self-employed now for about the last about 10 years or so. That started with a small windshield repair business in Riverside, California, and then I shut that down, became a contractor with FedEx Custom Critical, and did that for about 8 years with my wife. So I've been all over the country. I've been accused of being a constitutionalist by the United States Border Patrol, which happened in a dispute while I was doing that job. And then my wife and I moved to Fort Mohave, and I opened up a gunsmithing business here, and I've been making my living in the last couple of years as a gunsmith mostly.
Wow, that's very exciting because, I almost should bring you into the second hour too. Normally we talk about guns, and probably I'm going to ask you some questions about that too, since, as you said, you're kind of a new blood, you're not from law enforcement. So I'd like to also ask a little bit about the Second Amendment, of course, some gun situation. Now, straight to the point, everyone is like you're selling yourself in for a job market, okay? I'm not saying selling like
sure,
but at the end of the day, you try to get hired like all the other candidates for a public work. And let's say we, the voters, or at least we should be the people, say, okay, give us your best shot. Tell us why the voters of Mohave County should choose you, John Plough, right, for this position of county office. Why you're so specially unique? What do you have more than the other 5 or 6 candidates out there? Tell us.
Well, the number one reason that I got into the race was because we have serious challenges with our federal government exceeding their constitutional mandate. They're only given 10 powers by the Constitution, and none of those things are taking place in Mohave County, and yet they are sticking their nose in all kinds of things going on, not only just here, but also in other states as well. And one of the challenges we have with our local law enforcement, I can give you an example. There's 3,000 sheriffs in the United States, and of the 3,000, only about 10 of those people are actually on record as defending the citizens of their county against federal encroachments. And you'd mentioned, one of them earlier. Sheriff Mack is one of those guys. Mm-hmm. The reason for that, I think, is that in order to be a police officer or a sheriff's deputy, you have to be kind of authoritarian-minded. And let's face it, if you're going to spend your day in law enforcement, if you see a law, you want to enforce it.
Exactly.
And that is the mindset of most police officers. And so from the standpoint of a deputy sheriff or a patrol officer, that's actually kind of a good thing. But you want to be able to temper that, I think, by having someone who has not spent their career in law enforcement at the top. So, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, I'm not a hammer. I'm a salesman. I understand people. I understand how to talk to people. I'm able to take the opposing point of view. But on top of that, I'm also a law and order guy. I understand that there is a need for police officers, and in fact, in Mohave County, we actually don't have enough deputies. We ought to have more. Mm-hmm. But the main reason that I'm in the race is because I'm very concerned about what is going to take place in our country over the next few years. I mean, even if after we get rid of the clown who's in the White House now, everybody else that works in the government isn't going to leave with him. All of the statist wackos that are in place all throughout the federal government, and the BLM and FDA and the various alphabet agencies, they're staying. Mm-hmm. We're not getting rid of those guys just because Obama's leaving.
Exactly.
And what the sheriff needs to do, and most of them, to be frank, have been dropping the ball. The role of the sheriff is to protect the citizens' rights and to protect their property from people who are trying to violate or take that property. And those people who are doing it are not always, crooks hiding behind a corner. In fact, many of the illegal takings going on in the country are happening from government officials. And the sheriffs have the authority to intervene and stop this nonsense, and they're not doing it. And as a small fish in a big pond, I see that I have the ability, if I get elected, to be able to do something at least for the people of Mohave County, and that's why I'm in the race. I don't believe that you need a law enforcement background in order to manage a department of roughly 86 deputies. I mean, let's face it, the Mohave County Sheriff isn't going on patrol. The Mohave County Sheriff has deputies that do all that work. What the sheriff serves to do is to set the tone of the department, to train the deputies, to set departmental policy. And in Arizona, the most important thing that the sheriff does, and I don't think many of them are even aware of this, because I mentioned this at one of the other sheriff meetings where all of the candidates were there, and everybody looked at me like I had lobsters crawling out of my ears. Under Arizona law, in the Arizona statutes, I believe it's Title 13, Section 3875, says that the county sheriff shall set a policy for certifying outside law enforcement agencies to work inside the county.
Yes.
And so each county sheriff has the ability to decide who is going to be allowed to do law enforcement in his county. So you can certify federal agencies, or you can decertify federal agencies. You can work with the FBI if you choose to, or you can decertify their agents and not work with them. If you think that, like Mohave County, we have a lot of drug issues, if you have a good working relationship with the DEA and the U.S. Marshal's Office, you can certify a couple of their agents to work with you, but you can decertify the FDA and the BLM and all of these other wacko agencies that have no business doing law enforcement in the first place, and protect the people of your county from all of the nonsense.
Very good.
And
let me stop you one
it.
second. You seem very prepared, and I'm pretty impressed so far, I must tell you. Especially, I'm reading here your resume and at least your website. Please give 1 second, plug your website, since we're talking about Plough. Plug your website, please, so people can check it out themselves.
Sure. Anybody that wants to get more information about me can go to ploughforsheriff.com. That's PLOUGHFOR, and then sheriff.com. And if you put that in your Google window, it's going to come up as probably the top or the second search. And unlike most political websites, I actually have content on mine. So there's a whole bunch of links. There's information there so you can find out what's going on in the world, because I'm a big picture guy. And what I see coming down the tracks is a massive train, and it's about to hit the United States. And, I don't want to freak your listeners out, but anybody who's been paying attention to the world situation knows that something is coming.
Yeah.
And
normally, my listeners, they're pretty
Go ahead.
concerned. Now, I don't want to interrupt you. I want just to bring you some questions, but I think, you're right. This is a part of the big picture, and I agree with you. This is not just about what's happening in Washington. This is part of a global agenda to enslave us. It's called also global government. And most of my listeners, of course, know that. I was looking at your website, as I said, so we have some callers. You're a member of Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, the NRA, Oath Keepers, and of course the Republican Party, because you're running for the Republican Party. Tell me a little bit, how did you find out about the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association? How did you get involved with them? I think it's Sheriff Mack, correct?
Yes, that is Sheriff Mack. And, my father was a San Diego police officer, and back in the 90s, we had a corrupt sheriff down here locally. I mean, a really corrupt sheriff. They were dealing drugs and prostitution and stealing government funds. I mean, it was unbelievable what was going on in the sheriff's office back then. And so that was around the same time when we had the Brady Bill and all of this other nonsense was coming out. And so I've known about Sheriff Mack for a long, long time because we paid attention to those issues. And he was the first sheriff. He was joined by a few others, but he was the first sheriff to sue the federal government for usurping the authority of the county sheriff, and he won that in court. And so I've been following him a long time. As far as his organization goes, my understanding is what he is now doing is he's going around the country and training various sheriffs and their departments on what their constitutional responsibilities are. And if I get elected, if he's willing to come down and do a training for my deputies or at least my senior staff, I'm going to have him come down because, that's important. I really do believe that the role of law enforcement, and I don't even like the word law enforcement, my deputies are going to be peace officers. They're not going to be law enforcement officers. And the difference between the two is a law enforcement officer, if he sees you violate a law, he's going to enforce it. That means you're getting the ticket or you're getting arrested or whatever. What a peace officer does is a peace officer maintains the peace. If I can solve your situation without putting you in the system, that's what we're going to do. If I have to put you in the system because you're a super jerk or or you've committed the kind of crime that requires you to go to jail, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to be. I'm not going to be having my deputies going around and harassing people for all of the Mickey Mouse nonsense that the government puts on our back. So that's going to be the difference. I'm a big fan of what is called community-oriented policing, and in a community-oriented policing environment, the deputies, when they have free time, they're going to get out of their cars and they're going to go out and they're going to meet people. If they're working in an area where there are businesses, I want my deputies to go in and talk to the business owner, talk to the manager, find out who's on duty. I mean, think about it like this. If you have a situation that goes on in your neighborhood and you know who your local deputy is and you have a working relationship, don't you think you're going to be more comfortable contacting that guy than calling in and talking to a stranger?
Of course. No, this is very good. I agree with you. And by the way, you seem like almost you got psychic powers because you anticipated all my questions. Okay, so great job for you about that. Because I was going to ask you, what is the difference between a peace officer and a law enforcement? And you got it there. And of course, I was going to ask you more about Sheriff Mack, and you seem very prepared and pretty much articulate on that one. Very good. Now, talking about what we have right now in Mohave County, okay? From the point of a constituent, that we live here, you live here too, in Fort Mohave County. If we had to be, we want to give, I don't want to say grade, but let's say you want to express your opinion about how the actual Mohave County Sheriff Maccabi is running business. And this is not just because we try to throw mad at him, okay? It's just because, honestly, we need to see how you feel about is performing. Okay, since you are not just even a regular constituent, you are running for the same position. I would like to ask you this question: how would you consider the type of performance of the actual Mohave County Sheriff? If you had to be like, I don't know, some sort of a teacher, how would you grade him?
Well, that's a tough question, and I'll. What I'm concerned about is not so much the past, but the future, and that's why I'm in the race. So,
I understand.
Any one of the
we can learn from we can learn from our past to improve our future. I mean, that's why I don't want to bring that because we're going to be focusing on them. But I think it's important to learn from mistakes so you can tell us how would you do better. That's the point.
Okay. My understanding is that inside the department, and this is something you're going to get from most police officers. Police officers have a tendency to be type A personalities. They're typically very macho. They're very aggressive, and that's understandable because of the kind of work that they do. And so when you take someone who has a long career in law enforcement, like any of the candidates who are running against me or even our current sheriff, they're going to be type A people. And so type A personalities are great on the street because you can't push over when you're dealing with a meth dealer. Those people got to stand and deliver when you tell them to, and if they don't, you punch them out. I mean, that's what you do on the street. But when you're in management, you don't want type A personalities in management. I mean, even General Patton, believe it or not, his thing was largely an act. When the cameras were off and the news media was not around, he was actually a very nice guy, and he treated his people great. Everybody who worked for him loved him. And so from a management standpoint, having the type A personality in there, butting heads with everybody, causes issues, and it has caused issues in the past. So that's not something that I lay particularly at Jim McCabe's feet, because I have personally never met the man, but my understanding is from other deputies that there's issues with that, and I'm going to say that is just because of the kind of people who typically get into law enforcement anyway, and so you have that issue at every agency. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think has been going on in the department, and this has been going on forever, especially in Mohave County, is that the sheriff has not been making a good case to the county supervisors about how much money the actual sheriff's department needs in order to properly recruit, train, and maintain a professional force of deputies. The Mohave County Sheriff's Department is currently the lowest paid department in this area. If you throw a rock in any direction, you will hit the territory of another police department or agency that pays $4,000 to $5,000 more per year.
Wow!
And we're not in a vacuum. We have very high turnover rates because guys come through the academy, they come to work, they work for 2 or 3 years, they look over at Havasu and say, well, heck, I can pick up $5,000 a year, and they quit. And so every deputy that blows out costs the county about $75,000 in training.
Wow, that's a big money.
And that's not all the police academy. That's, a guy goes through the academy, he learns the basic job, and then you got to put him in a car with another field training officer for about a year's worth of time before that guy can step out and act as a deputy on his own. Mm-hmm. So he'll be with the department for almost a year and a half before you get any actual value out of that candidate. And then if that deputy quits 2 years later, you've basically flushed about $75,000 down a toilet. And so one of the challenges you have with police officers who then become sheriffs is they don't have the business and political skills that a salesman has in order to get a hold of the county supervisors and make them understand how the cow ate the cabbage. And when you're a person who is used to following orders, and let's face it, police departments are like military organizations. You do what you're told. And so to take somebody out of that environment and suddenly make them an executive, well, you end up with the situation we have, in that the county supervisors do not understand that the department is underpaid, that we're bleeding deputies, we're working these guys to death, and on top of that, we don't have enough deputies to begin with. Mm-hmm. So
let me stop you 1 second. Let me stop you 1 second, John. I want to, you made your point. That's good. I understand. Now, go back, dream for a moment, okay? It's here, election time. You are the new county sheriff, okay? And I think it would be kind of an achievement, because normally I don't remember any time soon that in the last, I think, 30, 40 years, maybe ever, I don't know. I didn't check in the historical records of Mohave County. Did we ever really had a sheriff, Mohave County sheriff elected not coming from law enforcement? I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell me. But let's say it happens. And I think it would be a great, interesting situation, because I never really heard that stuff. What would you do as priority in the first 6 months that you get into office?
The very first thing I would do is I would rewrite the Mohave County Sheriff's law enforcement certification guidelines, and I would decertify all federal agencies, with the exception of the agencies that we have a good working relationship with for drug enforcement and financial crimes enforcement. So most likely the FBI and DEA will regain or will remain certified to do law enforcement in the county, but everybody else is going to get decertified. There's going to be no law enforcement activity allowed by the federal government unless the agency has been properly trained and is following constitutional guidelines. Many of your listeners will probably know this, but a lot of people do not know that the Department of Education has a SWAT team. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Department of Education needs a SWAT team? And if they do you think they're properly trained? Yeah. Not likely. And so the FDA, none of those agencies are going to be allowed. That'll be the very first thing I do once I'm sworn in. We're going to make sure that there's no nonsense going on in the county.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Go ahead, please continue.
Go ahead.
No, continue. Go ahead.
I was going to say the second thing that needs to be done is, depending on who the new county supervisors are, if we get a new crew of supervisors, some of the people in the race have already committed to me that we are going to sit down and we're going to get the deputies' pay straightened out, because they understand that the primary duty of government is to protect the citizens. And on the county level, that's the sheriff's role. So the money in the county needs to be shifted around to make sure that when your grandmother in Dolan Springs calls for an emergency because there's a peeper in her backyard, that I can get a deputy over there before the guy's kicked in her window and killed her. We cannot have people waiting 20, 30 minutes on emergency calls because we don't have enough deputies. And that's a problem with the county supervisors not understanding what their job is. So if we have some changes on that level, then some of the other people in the race have already committed to me that we're going to get the budget squared away. We're going to be able to get enough deputies. We're going to get them trained, and we're going to get them paid so they don't quit. The other thing that is important to me is, as a person who's been self-employed for 10 years, I have always done my own taxes. And at the end of the year, when I sit down and stroke a $20,000 bill to pay my taxes, it really pisses me off, especially when I see the amount of money that gets wasted. So I'm going to go all the way through the budget, bottom up. I'm going to bring in experts on cutting costs. One of the things that I have done as a civilian is have dealt with companies who specialize in doing that, and they don't charge unless they save you money. So I can bring in outside experts who are motivated to go through all of the contracts, to go through every aspect of every dime that the county spends as far as the sheriff department budget is concerned, and we're going to get it straightened out. So when we get more money, I promise you we are not going to piss it away. If I put the prisoners on beans and rice, that's going to save money, and I already plan on doing it. The jail is about 50% of the budget, and so I'm going to take the biggest scrutiny there, because once we get the bad guys in a cage, all we got to do is keep them there.
John,
so
let me stop you one second, John.
Cable TV and everything else.
Are you aware, first of all, how much the jail, the Mohave County jail, the new jail, cost us? How much was the final bill?
It was bazillions of dollars. I know that. But my understanding is the jail is actually paid for. I think that a lot of the equipment... Here's another issue I actually have with the current sheriff. I called over there when I announced my run into the sheriff's office, and I said, look, I just want to talk to any deputy, command deputy, just somebody. I have a couple of questions. And they told me, no, you can't talk to anybody. That's against policy. And they took my phone number, and they said, someone with inside the department will call you back. Okay, well, it's been a month. Nobody's called me back. I thought that was pretty unusual. So just for my own edification, I called Yavapai County. All right, that's the next county over.
Yeah.
I was speaking with a senior command deputy within less than a minute. The guy talked to me for about 30 minutes. He answered all my questions about, from Yavapai's perspective. And I hung up the phone, and I thought, well, something must be going on over at Mohave County. If Yavapai will talk to me, and I'm running for Mohave County Sheriff, and I can't get anybody on the phone over there, maybe something's going on. So as far as the specific numbers about what's being spent and all of that, I don't have that at my disposal because they don't want to talk to me, which is fine,
Anyway, this is something that I think to the county supervisors you should be able to find out, and it's something that I think you should really discover, because the last time I checked was about probably $70 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was an astronomical number for Mohave County.
Yes.
And I would like to know really what type of gold or platinum did they use for the handle for the doors, because I can build a town probably for half of the price. Okay. Anyway, something interesting.
I can tell you this along those lines. One of the other things we're going to be doing is auditing past expenses. And if I see any monkey business going on, where there's not going to be any slap on the wrist crap from my department. I absolutely hate public corruption. I hate white envelopes being passed underneath tables, and any of that stuff that comes to my attention while I'm sheriff is going to be prosecuted. We're not going to play any games. These public servants are there to serve, not to fleece. And if I get a chance to hook any of them up for any public corruption, I'm going to do it. And I don't care if they're at the state level, the federal level, or the county level. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not a politician. I'm running because the sheriffs in this country have not been doing their jobs. They have not been hooking these people up. And I'm going to do it.
Okay, John,
They're
excellent.
terrified of me. The Republican Party has already asked me to drop out of the race.
Really? Why? When happened and
Yeah,
why?
I've already had more. I've had more than one phone call where they've said, "Yeah, you're not doing too well. Maybe you should get out now." And like, guys, we haven't even had the primary. What are you talking about? I'm not dropping out.
Wow.
They don't want me in the race.
Wow, interesting.
They want one of those people that they know very well who's going to look the other way. So, hey, that's not me.
Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer, of course, it's privacy, but any name, because every Republican who calls you, normally the elected people, and I know because I used to be a national delegate for the Republican Party, and before, of course, I became independent. Any name you want to throw out there so I can call him?
I'll tell you what. I don't want to do that, and here is why.
That's fine.
I don't know the intention of the people who asked me to get out of the race.
Okay.
It may have been that they honestly think I can't win anyway, and I'm wasting my time, or there may be something else. All I can tell you is that the conversations did happen, and I'm not dropping out of the race.
Perfect. Okay. I always say this is an open show for everybody. And when you're running for public office or you're already elected, I don't care if you're a precinct committeeman or district leader or whatever, chairman, this is public business. We're not talking about secrecy here. So that's good. Perfect. Now, let's talk about something that probably you're familiar. The last few years, I'm sure you're familiar, the federal government has been trying, and I say successfully, to militarize the local law enforcement. I hate the word too, by the way. I believe peace officer should be the right word. Anyway, through the DOD, Department of Defense program called also 1033. And we have an example. I went publicly, I don't know if you follow on the news, 1 year ago or so, with the actual Sheriff McCabe, the big saga or drama about the MRAP. We found out by accident that we had at least one military armored vehicle sitting at the sheriff's office. And, as a constituent myself, I was there asking more information. And as happened to you, I was pretty much ignored for more than a month after many phone calls and emails and things like that. Finally, I had to go through the public letters and articles through the media, local newspapers, and finally I was able to get some sort of a very generic answer.
Can I interject something really quick?
Of course. Go ahead, please.
That's not going to go on in my department. We are going to open things up. So as long as you're not asking questions about an ongoing investigation where we're not going to be able to talk about it, if someone calls me and wants to know why we're doing something, they're going to get an answer and they're going to get called back. This government secrecy bullcrap drives me absolutely insane.
Yeah, there was not really nothing no secret we found out. At the end of the day, it was very simple. This is a public a piece of hardware. We're talking about a military armored vehicle that is being given through this federal program called 1033 from the Department of Defense. And the only question I had, me with many other, let's say, constituents, was, first of all, why do we need an MRAP? And more important, what type of agreement we have with the federal government? Because nothing is free. We know very well when the federal government gives us something, that, by the way, we already pay with our federal tax dollar, at the end of the day, there's always some string attached, okay? So we wanted to know some sort of what exactly means for us, how much costs to us, and more important, what type of use do you forecast to use this piece of equipment? Normally, it's used in a military war operations. So finally, I was able to get a contract. But it was even a contract because it wasn't signed. It was from another police department. It was even from Mohave County. It was from Payson. And when I asked where is ours, nothing was given. But anyway, on this generic Payson Police Department agreement, there was something that was pretty disturbing that was pretty much probably was not even read by the sheriff at the time, that the Mohave County Sheriff Department to use to keep this over 700,000 armored vehicle, that means us with the taxpayer, we must use the vehicle for 1 year at least, okay, and must be placed in use within 1 year of receipt. And that's right there. I say, how are we going to keep this in use to justify it? There was no answer. The only answer was this is some sort of a tool that we need in case there is some sort of to defend property. And I found it kind of disturbing, even stupid, honestly, an insult to intelligence. Anyway, after all this drama and after a few letters to the editors, Sheriff McCabe decided to give this piece of hardware to another county facing the southern border, I guess. And I think maybe it was more appropriate use. And they're probably looking for something smaller. I don't know exactly how they're going to get it. But anyway, so my point is, how would you consider to have this sort of agreements with the federal government, like this program with the Department of Defense called the 1033? Would you comply with that? Would you go for that? Or would you find other avenues to find the right hardware for our officers, deputies?
Okay, so this is going to be a long answer. There is an appropriate role for the federal government in national defense. In fact, that's their primary role. So giving a sheriff's department a heavy-duty truck or an expensive sniper rifle or something like that because DOD purchased too many, I don't have a problem with that. It's actually much better than just parking the trucks out in the desert and letting them rot apart. So from using the money for the taxpayers' benefits, that's a good thing. So if the federal government wants to give me a Sherman tank and there's no strings attached to it, then yes, I will park it in our motor pool, and just in case Russian paratroopers come down from the sky, we have a tank, at least in Mohave County, ready to go. So that's kind of an extreme example, but you have to understand the federal government has already bought all those vehicles. They bought them for the war, and they are essentially surplus. Now, if it comes with the kind of strings attached that says I have to allow the FDA to raid milk farms in my county, then no, they can take their equipment and stick it. But my understanding is with that equipment, they are giving the equipment away with the expectation that you actually use it for something, but I don't believe that the strings attached are that you use it to drive over cattle ranchers' houses and then burn their cattle to death in support of the BLM. So from that standpoint, any equipment you get that might possibly serve the county that is essentially free is probably a good thing. Many people don't know this, but that under Arizona law, the sheriff is the captain of the militia in his county. Mm-hmm. The militia is the actual first line of defense for the country in case of insurrection or invasion or something like that. If you saw the movie Red Dawn, and it's not likely to happen, but if it were to happen, the role of the sheriff is to no longer do law enforcement, but to organize the militia and repel the invasion. That's a statutory responsibility of the sheriff. Now, if he doesn't have anything but 9mm pistols and his standard cruiser vans, well, that fight's going to be over with really friggin' quick. So from a national defense standpoint, it makes sense to have that equipment on the ground in control of the sheriff, because your sheriff is a local elected official and he's not likely to use his Sherman tank to drive over his constituents' houses. So
I understand.
I don't know. Does that answer your question, yes, or do I sound like a total nut?
No, I think you're completely right on this one, I tell you, and I would do the same, honestly. Of course, I'm not running for sheriff. People probably don't care what I think, but the idea is this one. If there are no string attached, that means that this only is going to be for the defense of our community with the sheriff, who is an elected person, not just some bureaucrat coming from another part of the world. Yes, I think more is better, because at this point we need to start to think about that there are different scenarios. And by the way, you weren't that crazy when we were talking about Russian troops or Chinese troops, because just to let you know, I'm sure you're familiar, for the first time in American history, we have Chinese troops now in Hawaii, and they're training also in the state of New York. We have Russian troops that they have, Russia had signed an agreement with FEMA a couple years ago, I think it was 2013, and you can read the article on the New American with all the sources. that the federal government, FEMA, the federal emergency government, that when they have some sort of a national disaster, natural disaster, or even just anything that they can declare national emergency, even an economic crisis, now they have an agreement that Russian troops, they can be used on U.S. soil for keeping the peace or to stop the dissenters or whatever they want to call it, the domestic terrorists. So I tell you, this is no more something that people should laugh too much because it's happening. So I agree with you. But
you are aware that President Obama has put the stop to the DOD sharing those kinds of tools with county sheriffs. In fact, he's been pulling that hardware back.
Yeah, but also it's kind of an interesting thing because he does one thing, at the same time is arming all the is federalizing the police, as you well know, and he's created this international program of international police under the United Nations to have this police force for, let's say, in the biggest cities. Now they did already a test. So they are disarming the county sheriff, but they are super arming all the different offices of police who are already pretty much being federalized. So it's kind of almost, I see the people on the other side or whatever side they want to call themselves, they think Obama is such a great guy and he tries to stop the militarization of police. At the same time, what he's doing is exactly enforcing the promises that he gave us during the election. Let me play one more time. I'm sure you're familiar with this speech here.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
I mean, you remember this speech, John?
Yeah, was that Hitler or Obama?
Yeah, pretty much his cousin, okay? I mean, this is the story. I mean, this guy is exactly doing all the things he told us. And yes, he's removing this program for the sheriffs, but as I said, it's also the same Homeland Security that I'm sure you're familiar. They purchased billions of rounds, I lost the count, for hollow point rounds, not for training. This is pretty much for final purpose, to killing people.
Yeah, they're for killing people.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a plan here that is laid down in front of our eyes. So I tell you, I'm kind of concerned because I see things, as you mentioned before, it's going to happen not just for the ranchers, but it could happen tomorrow for everybody, for people who want to homeschool or people that want to do not want to comply with these new EPA Nazistic, I call them, regulations. They can tell you if you can have a wood stove or not, or they can tell you how many...
Well, not constitutionally they can't.
Exactly. I mean, technically,
okay,
but
the federal government only has 10 powers. So all of this BS that they come up with that is outside of those 10 powers, the county sheriff can stop the enforcement actions. And that's why it is so important for people to stop electing cops and start electing people who are paying attention to what's going on in this country. The EPA can write all the rules they want, but unless you are engaged in some kind of interstate commerce, the federal government has no regulatory authority over you. Now, does that mean that I'm going to allow a company to dump poison into the Colorado River? No, it doesn't. But I'm also not going to let the EPA come and take away your wood-burning stove for your cabin up in the Wallapies and have your family freeze to death. There has to be somebody in the system that has some common sense who's paying attention to what's going on. And in the American system, that person is supposed to be the county sheriff, and they're not doing it.
Very good, very good. I think, you answer pretty much the most important questions that normally I don't say the listeners of this show, because I have several listeners. I also have listeners that they hate the guts out of me and they enjoy listening to me. That's fine. And I hope maybe we can educate them. That's the goal. I'm not trying here to be right. I'm just trying to bring you facts. And maybe, the point is, even people that normally they think they are on the other side, I have no sides. They call themselves left. I am not even right. I believe that there is at this point a right or wrong, freedom or tyranny. But think about, guys, think if you now, next election, you're going to have a super right-wing neocon president that is going to enforce things that you don't like. Guess what? You wish you had the right sheriff to protect your rights, because it's supposed to be about everybody's rights. The Bill of Rights doesn't say you're a Democrat, you're a Republican. No, the Bill of Rights, they're for me human rights that we all deserve. We all have those rights. Listen, let me tell you something else. You've been very prepared. You almost anticipated many of my questions. For example, I was going to bring you the militia, the Title 26, Article 2, Arizona Revised Statute. There is as you said before, we have it in our Constitution. We have it in our state laws. And the beautiful thing that everybody in this state of Arizona, between the age of 18 and 45, I will remember, we are automatically part of the militia, with few exceptions, of course, right. Judges. So the sheriff role, it's very important because you could deputize a great number of people without the cost to create, of course, a more secure and safer environment from all type of crimes, and that's very amazing.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to do is Mohave County is full of retired cops, and they're usually from major agencies. We got LAPD guys and a lot of California trained retirees out here, and there's quite a few cold cases I'm aware of that can't get worked because, and this isn't the sheriff's fault per se, he doesn't have enough deputies. You have to help the people who are alive as opposed to try and figure out who killed somebody a year ago, and if you only have 86 deputies, well, the cold cases go unsolved. And what I would like to do is deputize a bunch of retired officers who I know are bored to death because I've had some of them talk to me already, and set up a cold case posse and bring in as many guys as are necessary to start investigating some of these old cases and start looking at some of the things that have been going on in the county that I'm aware of and I can't comment on, but to have a set of experienced eyes look at them, and most of these guys will do it on a volunteer basis if we pay their expenses because they're already pulling retirements. Wow. And so I want to use that resource. I don't know if that's what you were driving at or if you were thinking about something else.
I mean, that's a great idea. Exactly. The point, when you have set some policies and some training with, of course, accountabilities, and we have already here this potential to have the organized and also the unorganized militia. And of course, you can create your own posse or whatever you want to call it. And also there is the unorganized militia that, of course, they are always willing, for what I know, to work with our elected sheriff. But they are also, it's called the people of the community organizing themselves for scenarios of the common defense.
In the event of a county emergency, all of the militia will be under the sheriff. And so it's very important that you pick the right sheriff. By Arizona statutory law, if the sheriff deputizes you, you're deputized. And that's the law that's on the books currently. So if you guys make the mistake of electing some fascist goofball and he deputizes you to go out and round up all the Christians and shove them in boxcars, you're going to do it or they're going to shoot you in the head. That's what happens when you have an emergency. So you had better make sure you elect the right sheriff. And I can tell you this for sure, I don't know where the other people stand, but if the order comes down to start force injecting people with Gardasil or start stuffing boxcars full of Christians or whatever, that's not going to happen in Mohave County. Not while I'm alive. In fact, I'll call out the militia to oppose it.
Very good. Question. I'm sure you seem like a very aware person. Let me throw at you some keywords, and probably you already know that, but I don't want to take it for granted. Are you familiar with the United Nations plan called also Agenda 21?
Yes.
Okay. And what would you do, or at least what would have you done if you were the sheriff, in this case, of, let's say, Burns, Oregon? I'm sure you're familiar with the situation with the Ammon, Bandy, and of course Lavoy Finicum. That I would like to ask you also, according to your eyes, as a person, as a human being who has two eyes and a brain, regardless that we have for sure, it's an alleged crime, but everybody's innocent until proven guilty. But how, first of all, do you feel about that video that we've seen of Lavoy Finicum being killed? From your point of view, that was a justifiable use of force, or was something more? Let's start with that.
Okay. On my website, ploughforsheriff.com, there is a link that is labeled, I believe, the Lavoy Finicum death video. And I personally went through, took that video, and ran it in slow motion to see if the story that the FBI had put out was true or not. My assessment is their story is total bullcrap. That man was tased and then shot after he was on the ground. The stop was illegal from the get-go. You are not allowed to, let me rephrase this. When you do a traffic stop appropriately, it is okay for law enforcement officers to block a road. However, when they do it, they have to leave someone a safe egress. They cannot design the roadblock in such a way that you have no choice but to crash your vehicle into a snowbank or collide with the vehicles. That's called creating a dangerous situation and not preventing one. It's already been through the courts. It's not allowed. Number one, the way that roadblock was set up in such a way that somebody was going to get killed. It was designed that way on purpose. That roadblock was set up after a blind turn on snowy, slippery road conditions where there was not enough room for Lavoie to stop that vehicle as he approached the roadblock if he had wanted to. That is very important. So right from the get-go, the whole setup was improper. Now, I can't speak to the motives of the officers involved with this. Right now, we don't know if they were FBI, if they were Oregon State Patrol. Some people are saying there's even mercenaries on the ground up there when this was going on. I don't have that insight because they're not talking. But I can tell you this, the way that roadblock was set up was not a police roadblock, it was a military roadblock. That's the kind of crap that they were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and at military roadblocks, you kill people, you don't arrest them.
Exactly. No, it's very important.
It's no surprise to me that the two witnesses in the car, if people want to get on those and see what the live witnesses said, both witnesses said they were shooting at the vehicle before Lavoie got out, number one. Both witnesses said he never drew his gun. Both witnesses said he was shot repeatedly while he was on the ground. Both witnesses said the car was shot up. We have not seen pictures of the car, so I can't verify the veracity of what those two witnesses said. But I have seen the video, and you can see sparks flying off the car as something is hitting it repeatedly. The windshield was shot up, and Lavoie certainly is dead. When he gets out of the car, he gets out of the vehicle, his hands are in the air. There is a officer or trooper or mercenary of some kind who is waiting just behind his bumper, crouched down. As soon as Lavoie crosses the bumper of his car, he gets shot in the side. That's when they say he reached for a gun. No, he was shot in the ribs. This officer then gets up and walks away and tries to seek cover. Another man comes running out of the bushes, and I believe that the man who came out of the bushes was actually trying to save Lavoie's life. That man was probably just a cop. He tased him. If you watch the thing real closely, he comes running out with his left hand extended. He points it at Lavoie. Lavoie drops like a ton of bricks. Then he drops what is ever in his hand, and he starts fumbling around on his right side, which looks like he was trying to pull his sidearm. While Lavoie was on the ground, he was shot several times. So what I think might have happened, I'm not going to say what I think might have happened because that's not appropriate.
I think you got to.
I can tell you this: if that was my department and those were my deputies, some people would be getting fired, and if what I think happened actually did happened, then some people would be on trial for murder.
Wow. Okay. Very important, very strong words, and I am glad that you have the courage to express yourself, because I know that many people in law enforcement in this community, they were completely not just silent but cheering it up. And as I said, after all, everybody's
a couple of the guys in the race. When I point that strong point of view out. And by the way, I'm backing it up. You can go on my website and look at the video. I'll show you exactly what happened.
No, I see that.
I don't need to see the reports. I can see what happened.
Exactly.
And when I point that out at the sheriff's meetings, the other guys just about, crap themselves. The expressions on their face are priceless. And that's why you don't want a cop as sheriff. Because after 20 years on the department, they see everybody in the civilian world as their enemy, and the only people they talk and trust are cops.
Can you mention the
names? That doesn't make them bad people. That's just the way it is. Sorry, go ahead. I was getting excited.
No, you're doing great. Great information. This is not because I'm trying to gossip here. I don't want to be National Enquirer, but I always ask you the question. And of course, you have a fifth. You don't need to answer. But I'm very curious to know who were doing these faces, because I would like to call them and see why they were smiling or smirking about this. Can you give the names out if you want?
No, I'm going to pass on that. Okay. I'm not a mudslinger. All I can say is that if you know anybody who's been a cop for 20 years, if you question the actions of any other cop in their presence, you'll get the same reaction. And I'm totally pro-police, so don't let the audience
John,
misunderstand me.
I have 2 minutes left.
I am pro-professional police who
John.
defend the Constitution and go after real bad guys. Lavoy Finicum didn't have a record. That
Yes.
guy hadn't even had a speeding ticket, as far as I know, in over 20 years. He was as big a Boy Scout as you can possibly be.
Yes.
We don't treat Boy Scouts in this country like Bonnie and Clyde.
Exactly. John,
Bonnie and Clyde get treated like Bonnie and Clyde.
let me
but
stop
not
you,
Boy-
John. Let me stop you 1 second only. Are you there? 1 second only, John. I need
Yeah.
to stop you because time is running short. I want to plug the last question, okay? We have about 1 minute, okay? And I want to ask you this that I would ask to everybody, just to be on record, okay? Anything that we should know, okay? Because, and I'm not talking about your personal private life, if you have any affair or whatever. This is your personal life. I'm talking about something about your past that maybe we should know. I don't know, domestic violence case, or maybe something that was concerning for the position that you may be elected. I give you 1 minute. You got the floor.
My understanding is I'm the cleanest person in the race. I've never smoked a joint. I've never been charged or prosecuted with anything. I've worked for the government twice, and that's about the worst you can say about me. And one of the jobs when I was at the government, I was a radio operator for the Department of Defense on board U.S. oil tankers. That requires a top secret clearance. Top secret clearances are not handed out, like candy. They do a real investigation. They talk to your neighbors, your relatives, your past girlfriends. And so to get one of those, you got to be cleaner than Jesus, almost. And, so that's me. And if the people from Mohave County want to help me get elected, they need to get out there and get signatures, because I'm not even going to be on the ballot if I don't get 500 signatures. So they need to see Walt at the upholstery shop, or download my signature form. It's right on my website, and get their friends' names, addresses, and phone numbers on that nomination form, or they're not even going to have a chance to vote for me.
Last time, give again your website, please, John. Go ahead.
It's ploughforsheriff.com, PLOUGHFOR, sheriff.com.
Perfect. Okay, listen, this was exciting, and I'm very excited to have all of you guys running for any position, especially for county sheriff position. Don't go away. We're ready for hour number 2. We talk about guns and training. And don't forget, if you want to support the show, go to Zanna, ZANNA.us. You can download any of my songs, and in this way, this show always will be free. In the means that we can say whatever we want. Don't go away.
He's a songwriter, a poet, a rifleman.
I'm not afraid.
And a constitutional activist.
I'm not afraid.
Italian by birth.
I'm not afraid.
American by choice. Gianluca Zanna.
I'm not afraid.
And his new CD, Love, Guns, and Freedom. 16 powerful songs on one CD from the heart of a patriot. For download or to order the CD, go to www.lovegunsfreedom.com. That's www.lovegunsfreedom.com. Lyrics for your mind, music for your heart.